welcome to our webinar. Very excited about this. Is the PetPack and Vetstoria webinar on client communications. And I'm really excited to be here tonight with our friends from Vetstoria. So the purpose of this webinar is to talk to you about the importance of proactive communication with your clients. And one of the things that has sparked this, obviously, has been the last 2 years where there's been a massive requirement for communicating change to our clients. And we'll get into that a little bit more. And we've learned a lot about that, and there's some really good lessons going forward. And the importance of, from PetPack's point of view, as online marketers talking about this with Vetstoria, is that often the chain of communication from a consumer or a client standing out there in their homes or wherever they are through to the practice is that it comes through one of our communications, then goes into the booking system with Vetstoria, and then gets booked into the practice. So it's really important to have a look at the steps all the way along there to make sure the communication is actually working. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to have two parts. I'm going to deliver the first section, about 20 minutes, and then Nate will cover off on the booking elements, which will follow that for approximately another 20 minutes. Then we'll have time for questions. Now, if you have any questions or thoughts along the way, please put them in the chat box and we'll answer them either at the end or follow them up with an email. So just a little bit about PetPack. For those of you who I haven't met, James Ramsden, good to meet you. I'm the co-founder of the business and managing director. And PetPack is a company that specializes in online marketing and communications for vet practices. So it started as a small business myself, as a practicing veterinarian who saw an opportunity to provide some comms for my clients. In fact, I actually got on the phone. I started ringing clients proactively. Proactive phone calls to clients, when I started doing that, were not something that was done. And we worked out pretty quickly that clients actually liked it when you rang them 2 or 3 days before the bandage caused a problem, and then they were angry with you. So the whole system of communications was built from there. So we went to email. Email's still a very big part of effective communications, through to websites, social media, and a bunch of other services. You know, from my point of view, looking in at vet practices, I don't practice anymore, so I get my good friends at the local vet practice to look after my dogs. And one of the things I really appreciated from them was, when I went to see them during the pandemic, was that I got a proactive text from them explaining to me how the consult process was going to go, because I was just going to walk straight in, but that wasn't the case. I had to wait outside and I had to go through a few steps. But they'd already explained that to me beforehand. So, you know, rather than me getting out on the footpath in front of the clinic and the stress of handling a sick animal, and then being told I had to do something that I wasn't expecting, I already knew. And I think that was admirable from that practice. They were under the pump, as a lot of practices have been at the time. And, you know, but they had the time and foresight to actually send me a message beforehand. And I really appreciated that. It helped me build my respect for them as practitioners, which is interesting. It's the old story. You know, you can't assess how good the vet is because you don't know how to do surgery, but you can tell whether their coffee's fresh or not. So proactive communication is a bit like that. They really help you respect and get an insight to how an organisation like a vet practice is run. So just a list of the sorts of changes that we're talking about here that are appropriate or really good for proactive communications. You know, we've got the sort of 3 main categories here. You've got alerts, you've got operational, and you've got non-urgent operational. So alerts, that's, you know, I'm not going to read through the list, but they will resonate with you at some level. Road closures is a really good one. You know, we've had clinics where they've had actually roadworks going on, and it's actually obstructed the parking. So we have sent messages on behalf of the clinic out to all their clients in the community saying this is what's happening. It really helps people, particularly when they're in distress trying to get to the clinic. You know, operational urgent lockdown procedures, you know, there's a million of them. And one of the challenges we've had for practices is really, especially in Australia, keeping up to date in terms of how they communicate to their clients. And we've helped sending messages out about that process as well. The other one, with regards to operational non-urgent, new or discontinued services. Really good example of a clinic we've been working with recently, where they merged with another practice, and there were many messages. So you had some services were discontinued, so they had to communicate to their community that one of the clinics was no longer going to be operating, and all the associated messages around that. But then they also needed to communicate that the clinic that they were merging with, the staff were still going to be operating, but they'd moved into a new location. And there was some changes to the staffing, but in essence, the clients of the old practice were still going to get the same service, but it's just going to be in a different building. So that's an example of what I call a relatively complex operational non-urgent communication piece. But as you can see, there's a whole spectrum of reasons why you want to get on the front foot, if you can, and communicate to your clients. One of the other benefits also, which I alluded to just before, was that if you do get on the front foot and communicate, even if it doesn't affect all your clients, it shows in their minds you're actually thinking about them and trying to be proactive. And people love it when you're actually proactive about these things. And if you can think of a business you've had a dealing with where they weren't proactive, and you got there and they weren't open when you thought they were, but you know what the frustration's like, and we just don't want that frustration. It's just some good little graphics here about the sorts of responses. The indecipherable screaming, I've had that multiple times, and particularly around COVID, we've had a lot of changes. So, I think these sort of pictures describe for themselves why proactive comms around changes are so important. Now, one of the things you want to talk about is what channels are available to you. And there are many channels available to you. And as online marketers and communicators, we operate in most of these channels for clinics. Let's just run through the main ones here. Now, the website is probably your main one, certainly for inbound people coming into you that want to book. And I'm going to show you an example in a minute of what we would do on a website when we've got a notice to present to the clients who want to make a booking. One of the things I'd like to say about websites is it's really important to understand that of all the inbound calls coming into your practice, a website accounts for about 40% of those calls, only 40%. And that might be a surprise to many of you who have not seen the stats, but it's important to understand that about 50% of all your inbound calls are coming from a service called Google My Business, which is the map listing on phones. Now, on that listing itself, you've got the capacity to put updates and also your hours, particularly around public holidays or changing your hours. It's really important that you actually address that service, because many people will not look at your website. They'll look straight at Google My Business and they'll expect it to be correct. And if it's not correct, that's where you get the frustration. And we're going to go into a bit more detail about all of these, but you can see we've got email, social media, SMS, your phone system, and online booking. And Nate will be covering off on the online booking as we go. So if you're going to put out a message, I just want to talk a bit about the sorts of key points you want to put in a message. Now, the first thing is you want to keep it short and concise. And, talking to my fellow colleague vets tend not to necessarily keep things short and concise. Their team members often do, but it's really important to be short and concise and straight to the point, and only include the key details. We don't really need to know that Telstra or whatever phone company you're using driving you nuts because of blah, 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 blah. All we need to know is the phone's not working. And also, let's be friendly and use a human tone. And where possible, a bit of humor. I'm going to show you some examples as we go through. Humor is really incredibly disarming, humanizing, and connecting, particularly if you've got a proactive message going out before it's an issue for your clients. Any sorts of details you can give them that's quickly digestible that might help. So, for example, one of our clients, we were sending messages out about a road blockage, which meant that the clients had to go quite a long way out of their way to get to the clinic. Now, if you're in the clinic and you're aware of this roadblock, it's just easy for you to think, oh, it's easy to get there. But for a lot of people, it's a bit challenging. So we provided a map, and having an actual map there they can look at, they can click on and use, very useful. So just think through the sorts of useful things that might be helpful. And then always provide some way for the client to call you, email you, or whatever is your preferred way of communication. Make sure you can actually get that feedback coming in. So websites, I'm going to drill into a couple of the key areas where you want to actually have this message. Now, having a notice on your homepage is really, really important or powerful as well. And the example I'm about to show you, you'll see that it stands out. You want something that actually they can't miss, particularly if it affects the way you're operating or the way their experience might impact you, which might be a change of hours or a change of billing or whatever the process is. In addition to that, you probably want to add a notice on your contact page, because probably 16% of people are coming into your practice, into your website through the Contact Us page, and they may not see the homepage. And then, you know, if there's always on those notices, you want to have a way for people to actually contact you, to actually ask a question. You know, is that blockage happening today? Do I really need to be doing that? Do I really need to be wearing a mask? All those sorts of things. So let's have a little look at the example. Here's a good example. We've taken the clinic names out of the examples, but they're real examples. So you can see here that before anyone actually goes and makes a phone call or books online, they're going to be reading this red notice, and it's got the key messages in there. Also, with these notices, you can actually click on the cross, of course, and remove them, and then you can remove it. But you're not, as a consumer, you're not going to miss that message. And that will really help to make sure that they understand. One of our clients is operating in an environment where, probably more than many other practices, they have a staff shortage, but they've also got a massive excess inflow of clients due to some strange local situations. So typical scenario for a lot of practices, but theirs is a lot heavier. So they've had clients who normally would be able to get an appointment within that day, not be able to see the clinic for several days. And there's been some frustration. So a message like this on the website and potentially in other places as well is very, very helpful to explain to people why they may not be able to be seen on that day. And it might say something like, for example, of course, in an emergency, we'll see you straight away, but generally there's going to be a 2 or 3 day delay. And that's been very effective. Now, the other area I want to cover off on is social media, because social media is obviously seen by many of your clients, but also your community, people who might not necessarily be your clients. So it's a really good way to distribute widely a message. So a couple of key points here. First of all, you want to make that message stand out. We'll show you an example in a minute. But the other thing too is, as we talked about in the last webinar, only about 4% of your audience will actually see a particular post, which is low. So you need to repost. So you need to have, depending on the importance of the message, but you need to have a process where it's going to be coming back again to make sure you're getting to more people. And by the way, we're not just relying on social media here. We'll talk about other channels, but in social, you need to have a reposting process. And then, as you will do with good social media behavior, you need to be prepared to respond, because people will have asked questions. Do I really need to wear a mask? Or whatever the question is, you need to be able to respond to that. So here's a really good example. Once again, a real example. You can see this post will have text underneath it as well, which is giving a little bit more information. But obviously, the key message here is there's something wrong with the phones. You can see this is a job we did for a particular client. You can see there's a bit of humour. The message is going out at or before the time that we know that the phone's going to be out, before if possible, and it's eye-catching because it's a great picture. And once again, you're going to need to repost this, not necessarily the same post, but repost the message several times. Now, I'm glad I got to this bit, email. We talked about email in the last webinar, and the number one message about email is it is the most effective communication tool you have with your existing clients, because something like 91% of your clients will actually receive the message, whereas just repeating social media, much, much lower, more like 4%. So if you're going to send a message out that's important to your clients, don't just rely on social, but do it on email and on social together. And that's how we generally run our comms to our clinics' client bases, is on both. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do it. If you've got an email newsletter, which we strongly recommend, because the email newsletter establishes a habit with your clients about expecting regular communications from you, it's a very good place to put a message about a particular notice or change. Like we've got a road closure, we've got a problem with their phones. Now, you can't always put it into your regular newsletter because it might be very time sensitive. Like we've got a problem with the phones, which has just happened. In that case, you want to send a standalone email, and you may even choose to do a standalone email as well. But if you're going to do a standalone email, once again, like your email newsletter, presentation is paramount. So you need to make sure you use your proper templated layout. So branding, communication, so that when someone gets it, straight away they know it's from you. And one of the challenges that clinics have when they're doing these communications is dashing off something which might have a typo in it or it looks a bit average. So while you might have an urgent message to get out there, make sure someone else checks it and it looks neat and tidy. It just has to be neat and tidy. And regardless of whether with either of these email forms, you want to make sure there's a ability and a quite a clear call to action, like give us a call or email us if you have any questions. But strongly recommend email as a way to get your message out to as many people as possible. And look, once again, which goes without saying, collect as many email addresses from your clients as possible. This is for one of the reasons why you want to do that. Here's an example of an email that was a standalone email. And you can see from this that, it's a pretty boring topic, but it's important because in this particular clinic, it affects many of their clients. They're operating on accounts and they're changing the way that's operating. So they're making a really big effort here to get this message out to as many people as possible, and they'll be running this across social as well. Once again, you want to get to the point pretty quickly. You don't want it to be a complicated message. And once again, if it's about accounts, someone might be a bit upset about having a change to their accounts. That they've been able to, not pay you for ages for many, many years, and now it's changing. So you want them to be able to call you. And once again, you can see it's very well presented. Now, there are other channels, and we haven't covered many of these. Just a couple of comments about that. You can see on this list here that Google My Business is on the top here, and I will reinforce that. 50 to 60% of all your inbound calls coming through Google My Business if it's set up and running properly. So really pay attention to that. A good example of that is, I use Google My Business to check whether a cafe or restaurant are open. And, generally cafes and restaurants are pretty good with Google My Business because I know so many people use it. And, I rely on them to be up to date. And I think it's important to take that same view that your clients will see Google My Business the same way and make sure that your opening times are correct. Phone system messages, pretty helpful. I think SMS and reminders are super, super, super powerful, but you want to use them sparingly because they're quite invasive. I mean, I get texts from my mum, and I don't necessarily want to get texts from every business. So I think it's important to understand that your clients respect you greatly, and if you do send them something important, it might be the phones are down or there's a road closure, that SMS is quite appropriate. As you know, when you send reminders for vaccination via SMS, they're well received. So just be judicious about that. But SMS is super powerful, and if you can get that running, I would encourage that. Another thing is email signatures. If you can put email information at the bottom of email, because the clinics are using email more and more with their clients. It's really helpful. You might just be just remember we've now got grooming. Remember we've now got grooming. I mean, it's a great way to reinforce a new service or even a service you're not doing. Clinics often are doing renovations, and if they're renovating, a particular service may have stopped, like grooming. So putting that message into email signatures is really helpful. And then with the booking page and process, I'm going to hand it over to Nate. But the opportunity with online booking, as online booking grows, to actually be very clear up front what the limitations or restrictions or changes are, or even opportunities in the booking system for an online booking is a fantastic thing to do. Rather than, and a good example of that is if you use a good e-com store, like a good clothing store or something like that, you'll notice there are no surprises with the checkout process. Any surprises happen at the start. So it's, you take a leaf out of their book and put any restrictions, changes right up front, so people understand before they get to the end. They're about to book, and then you tell them, that delivery's $4,000, and you go, no way, and you pull out. So you need to get that information up front really quickly. Thanks, Nate. Over to you.
Thank you, James. Hello, everybody. Good evening, Australia. And if anybody is up early here in Europe, that's where I am. So really wonderful to do this again. Last time it was at 3 a.m. So I'm really happy that I'm actually able to speak clearly, hopefully. So thank you, James, for that wonderful presentation on client communication. So what I'm about to present is basically a continuation of it. Before I start, just a bit more information on, I'm sharing my screen, you can see, right? Is the thing, cool. So on the call here from Vetstoria, there's me, Nate. I'm the partnerships manager. So I've been with Vetstoria for a couple of years, basically communicating with other companies and finding out about their challenges. And there's also Sharon, who is our account manager, account director in APAC. So Sharon has, a good few years of experience, over 10 years, I believe, in the veterinary space. She is our product specialist. Before joining Vetstoria, she was with Covetris. So I'm sure you are familiar with this company. So the topic I'm going to focus on is time saving. And I think, with all the effective communications, I think any process, if the process is streamlined and optimized enough, you will save time during the process. And, speaking with so many partners and practices over the past 2 years, they've all reflected that there is a common pain, and that is the lack of time. And, the recruitment crisis in the veterinary industry has long existed before the pandemic. So, there's very little we can control in the broader, world. We can't really magically create more vets and nurses, but we can control how we are equipped within the practice to handle the pressure and mitigate the pressure. And time is your best friend. So anything you can do to save a bit of time, and that's going to be really gold. So I've put 5 hours per week here. I'll tell you why I've calculated and arrived at 5 hours. Obviously, it depends on how big your practice is. So I've mentioned a little bit about this veterinary recruitment crisis, but we are in this perfect storm of a pandemic, a veterinary recruitment crisis, and increased pet ownership. I mean, 2 million more pets in Australia since 2020 for a country that has 25 million people, and that is nuts. So, and the perfect storm also created this vacuum because new pet owners can't really get appointments. With all the closures, with prolonged period allocated to each appointment. That means fewer pets are being seen while there's new pets. So pet owners, they call up different practices to make appointments, but they only attend the first one and they don't cancel the rest. So this creates a gap in your schedule, and it's really creating, not to mention there's revenue loss, but for the team morale, for the mental health, and the increased stress is just a vicious cycle. So so in this presentation, I'm going to show you a couple of things that we help practices do with technology that will save time through automation and save time with different features that you can implement to mitigate the no-show problems. So, okay, let's see what I've got for you here. Oh, and also, I think this really applies to the UK and the UK pretty much because of Brexit. So we normally get most talents from the EU, and now we don't. So we brought this on ourselves. And most vets are really, 74% of vets concerned about stress and burnout. And yeah, so anything we can do to help, we can't really. But so this is our way of addressing the recruitment crisis. So we're hoping to make some positive change within our power, really. So online booking is a form of automation. I think Vetstoria is brilliant at this smart triage process, because a veterinary appointment is not the same as a haircut or a restaurant reservation. You need to have certain veterinary sensibility in there, and the tool will need to be able to tell if an appointment could potentially be an emergency. So this triage process is really what we are the most proud of. So with the triage, and is obviously synced with your practice management system, and that creates a seamless transition from a pet owner arriving on your website, seeing an appointment available, putting in all the details they need, the species, the problem, the symptoms, and then they're shown the earliest slot, and they book the appointment, and that goes into the schedule. If the practice decides to take a deposit, to reduce no-shows, they're welcome to do that. So all this process, all these steps within the process is completely automated, and that saves you time. So this chart is showing you an example of a practice in Yorkshire. So I'm not going to name names, but it's so basically this practice has 11 branches and altogether 24 doctors. So they decided to use online booking at the beginning of January, at the beginning of this year. So some of the practice owners, some of the practice managers within this organization were very skeptical. So they started very slow, one onboarded, and they had to really persuade the staff and educate their pet owners that there's online booking available. So as you can see, the change happened gradually, but as more people saw the benefit of using online booking, more practices stopped delaying the onboarding process, because it is a bit of work to completely mimic your practice booking workflow. So you do have to spend a couple of hours with our onboarding specialist to really tell us, your doctor's preferences, to go through every single scenario. So that does take work. So when this practice signed up, all 11 practices didn't jump on it straight away, because you need to, we're saying we're giving you the help, but we're too busy to sit down with you and implement the system. So gradually, one started, more jumped on board. So from 0 appointment being booked online at the beginning of January 2021, that means all of the appointments at the time were being booked over the phone by the receptionist. So now, not now, August, that increased to 600. So if you think for each phone call, that's about booking a routine appointment. It takes 2 to 3 minutes. That's 600 of those saved in a month. So that's just basically, I wanted to show you this graph just to show you that online booking, if you don't already know the benefits, it takes a bit of convincing. But your clients, the pet owners, they are ready from day one. So if you offer them the option, they will book online. And obviously there are part of your clientele that may never be so digital. And maybe they choose not to be digital. Maybe they prefer that phone interaction with you. Maybe you do need to take the time to speak to them on the phone and in a meaningful way. And that process should absolutely not be automated. And that's why it's even more important to free up the phone for those who you absolutely need to speak to. And 600 times 3 minutes, and that's how much time you have freed up for those type of conversations, or simply have a coffee break, check in on your mates, and patient care, right? So, what I like about this quote, this is from an American singer called Madonna Newton-Minogue. Time is money and the money is mine. Yeah, I love, no, it's not Olivia or Kylie. They would be too classy to talk about money in this way. It is Madonna. I just wanted to see who's still paying attention. So yeah, I've mentioned the importance of time saving. And if you are using Vetstoria, you should still watch this, because I don't think you have, it would be fantastic if you're already using all of these, I guess, features. But if you're not using Vetstoria, you should also listen, because I'm not going into the feature details, but it's just an idea of what you can do. And I'll show you some examples of how some practices have done their, I guess, time-saving, creative magic. So I'll just quickly go through some of these steps. So disable specific appointments. When COVID first hit, people were told to stop the preventative care somewhere. Everything you've been educating your clients about, like vaccinations, has to be delayed. Only very critical things were being seen. So what you can do in this instance is to make that type of appointments available, but give it maybe a longer wait. So let's say you have a puppy vaccination or a cat vaccination, you can set the time to maybe 3 weeks in advance. So when people choose this, I will show you an example actually. So this is actually a PetPack website. I really like this clean design feeling, and it's very prominent, the book online button. So when people arrive on the website, if they want to book an appointment, they know exactly where to go. So this is virtually Vetstoria. So you're able to choose the species, because all this determines the type of appointments that you may be able to have. So for example, new puppy kitten checkup vaccination, and if you can choose the doctors, because some doctors may not really like certain species. So let's say no preference. What you can do, so at this moment, Vetstoria is looking at the practice management system to retrieve the available time slots. So if you were to set the setting for this type of appointments to be 3 weeks in advance, so the earliest slot you'll be able to see is actually going to be 3 weeks later. So in this instance, you are building yourself a buffer, and it is taking quite a while. Let's it could be that I'm in the UK. So you're building yourself a buffer, and that's basically what I meant by gap to earlier slot. But obviously you can disable this type of appointments altogether if you decide not to take vaccinations until further notice. And in this instance, you're able to actually, so let me just refresh this bit. So this is another clinic in the UK. This is also Vetstoria. this one says vaccination advice since COVID restrictions and ongoing control measures. You're able to put any disclaimer you like, and people must tick that they've understood before progressing to the next step. Okay, so the time slots for cat vaccination, right, is now being displayed here. So if you wanted to build yourself a buffer, you can make this date to be much, much later. So that's what I mean by changing the gap to the earlier slot. Reserved slot count. So let's say if you are, let's say if you have low staff and you don't want to see too many types of one condition because, you know, based on your veterinary experience, you know, these aren't super critical. So you can definitely limit the number of appointments based on the type to be displayed. So that also builds yourself a buffer if you want to, I guess, say, just reprioritize. The new client form is something that we're able to build. I won't show you an example, but some practices, after you've selected I'm a new client, you're able to immediately embed a new client form. So this would be typically done at a practice on a, you know, clipboard. So you'll be able to have all this information sent over to you. By the time the appointment is booked, the client is onboarded. So that will save you, I don't know how many minutes, but I'd imagine quite a lot of time. So new client form, repeat prescriptions. So imagine if you were to speak to somebody about a medication refill, not only they be on the phone, but it's also your precious time. So this practice is in the UK. So all this is Vetstoria at the moment. So you're definitely able to just make medication pickup as a type of appointment. And so this will direct you to the booking widget. See, medication order is pre-selected, and that's the only appointment type that you're able to do. And dispensary nurse. So that's the only person who's going to be responsible for this type of appointment. And so once you've made the booking, the person will get a notification and they'll have time to prepare for your meds. And this whole process is almost automated. No phone call has ever been taken, right? So that's how much time you've saved with this type of appointments. Holiday block-offs. I think this is very, very simple because the integration with the practice management system, you can just block out your time on the schedule and it will be reflected on Vetstoria. Disclaimer I already mentioned, and I think this ties in nicely with James's point about, you know, communication, pre-consult communication, because if you're able to customize all this, and if people were to spend a couple of minutes to read through this, I remember James showing like an example, the red page within the page. That looks wonderful. We can, you know, I think this is where PetPack and Vetstoria can work in tandem. We're able to incorporate, you know, some of the things that the marketing agency and the website provider have come up with and work it within the process. And yeah, and when James was talking about email marketing, all this can be done within an email with a smart link. By smart link, I meant a campaign specific link. So you're able to direct people to the right appointments, and you've already set up, you know, all the background things like how many the maximum slots you want to offer. So all this can be embedded within email marketing, and people are able to action when they're ready. So that's that. About time saving, I also wanted to mention that if the staff shortage is a problem, there are creative ways to get around, because we have a client that opened the practice during the height of the pandemic, and this practice is Stellar Vets. So David Hodges is a friend of Vetstoria. He was a very successful vet. He built his practice to a 20 practice empire, and he sold it to a corporate. So obviously he made a lot of money doing that. during the pandemic, he got a bit bored and he wanted to see some pets. So it was just him. And he opened an independent practice after having had a successful career, just with his partner. And with no staff whatsoever, the entire practice was automated. So he basically opened the practice already with Vetstoria in place. So no receptionist is needed for appointment booking, and he hates people calling him. So on his website, he actually says, if you book an appointment online, you pay £5 less. So don't annoy me, book online, because if you call me, you're gonna annoy me and I don't have time to see you. And all of his appointments are prepaid. So if he doesn't know how much this appointment might be, he's going to ask you to pre-authorize a higher amount so that he can deduct, what might come as additional charge. So, I mean, imagine this practice has eliminated the booking, has automated the booking process, automated the payment process. And imagine if this was to, work in tandem with email marketing and specific campaigns. And the funny thing is, because no one was able to find appointments with their usual vets, his practice was actually the only place where pets can be seen. So that was an instant success. Yeah, so there are many, many ways that you can still save time and make things work within this very grim reality that is the recruitment crisis and the pandemic. But technology is always your best friend. So yeah, I'm very happy to be able to show a bit more of Vetstoria. And Sharon here is your account manager in Australia. So if you have questions, do speak to Sharon. And let me just stop sharing. Yeah, if you have any questions, do speak to Sharon, and we'll be able to show you, the full Vetstoria experience. And with PetPack, I think we already have many, many mutual clients, and I think if we'll look out for people that could be, really utilizing the combination of our two services. And we can't wait to engage with our Australian clients. And obviously I know you guys are exploring other territories as well. So yeah, we'll have a much closer relationship.
No, that was excellent. Just a question for you, and sort of discussion point is why do you think that vets or practice managers resist online booking when the evidence from the consumer end is that consumers want to use online booking?
I think veterinary people are very imperial minded, so very evidence-based. And the sad thing about online booking is Vetstoria is actually the very first, and probably, I think at least in the rest of the, in Australia, I know there's another provider, but Vetstoria is actually one of the first. So because it's new, because there's not much done, I think the veterinary people, the adoption curve, the innovation adoption curve, I think veterinary people, because they're very evidence-based, they're not as, I guess, they're a bit risk averse, I would say. Yeah, right. So in terms of, e-commerce, travel, hospitality, when there's a new thing, everybody jumps on it. But in the veterinary space, I think most people, not that they are not not that they're not open-minded, but I think it's just because there's this danger of thinking, well, that's the way we have been doing things. So they resort to that, especially in a time of crisis, not because it's effective, they know it's not, but because it's familiar. And I think that's that. But having said that, you also saw the example of David Hodges, who completely, reinvented the whole thing. He opened his practice without a receptionist, So yeah, but I am definitely seeing a shift. Now there are a lot of companies that focus on educating clients. Like PetPack, for example. You guys are the only veterinary marketing agency in Australia. How many marketing agencies are there in Australia? Loads. Melbourne is the hipster town. Literally everybody's in marketing, but veterinary, not that many, right?
Yeah.
So
It's interesting because I think all of us sat on the couch during the pandemic and ordered things from our phones, and for a lot of people it was a discovery that you can order stuff from your phone, and so that's one thing. It's surprising, but we're also seeing the uptake growing amongst practices, and the leaders have always been there. There's a client of ours in Tasmania who's been analysing their booking and front desk performance data, and learning that the online booking is actually making the front desk work better. But that sort of information takes a while, I think, to filter through to the rest of the population. I mean, I'm really encouraged by what I see with Vetstoria, because we know that it works well, but also we're starting to see that it's actually helping practices. So I'm just looking forward to more online booking. And I think, one of the things that's important is the communications that we run for practices need to help the consumers understand that the online booking is available. So that's, it's about making sure your website's structured properly, maybe even talking about it in the comms that go out.
100%.
No, it's a really good experience. So if we look forward to 2 or 3 years down the track, I think online booking will be a much bigger percentage for most practices, which is terrific.
And I would also add, so we have over 3,000 practices using online booking, but not many have the help and expertise of a marketing agency when it comes to SEO, traffic. So usually the best performing practices where the clients are happy, leaving good reviews, the number of appointments being booked online much higher. They're usually the ones that have help. So I think that really just shows that the website in marketing in general and online booking, they really do work together, because and obviously ultimately we want more appointments to be booked online, because that means less phone calls. So so I would say the majority of good performing practices, if they don't have the expertise in-house, they really recognize the need to have good SEO, good traffic. And Google My Business, you mentioned earlier, it needs to be updated with the correct information, but we're able to integrate with Google My Business. So if people find a practice on the internet, they will want to book straight away, and we make that step simple. So I think, it's the need to help clients see that there's help available is really important. So I'm very, very excited about the veterinary space, and
Well,
so,
thank you very much. And you're heading off to the London Vet Show today?
I am, yes.
You can have coffee first or anything before you go, or is you can whiz off?
I might take a nap, to be honest.
Well, good on you, mate. Thanks for getting up early. I know it's a bit later than last time, but still early. So thank you.